So, I broke a god. You'd think that would come with a parade. Instead, I got the morning after, a whole kingdom of mind readers waking up to find their gift guttering like a wet candle, their gods exposed as gears, and their holy tower cracked open down the middle like an egg. Turns out, when you crack the machine that runs a world, the world notices the draft. Here's the part the songs skip. Freeing people from a machine and freeing people into a working world are not the same job. That machine wasn't only a leash. It was the wall. And I just put a very large crack in the wall. Out at the edges, where the sigils used to burn brightest, the wards were the first to go dark, and the blight, the wasteland horror this whole kingdom was built to hold back, felt the door swing loose. My great victory had a body count with the ink still drying. Classic Tuesday. So I spent my glorious first week as the man who ended tyranny doing unglamorous carpentry on reality. Cane soldiers and my crew and anyone with two hands, plugging holes in a wall I helped weaken. You break a thing on purpose, you own what leaks out. Nobody ever puts that on a coin. And they came to me, the erased. The vault I cracked open in the tower emptied out into the roads, hundreds of the officially dead blinking at a sky they weren't filed to see. Free and lost, and looking at the blank-handed reject who let them out like he had a plan for Act 2. I did not yet have a plan for Act 2. And then, on the third night, the wound in the machine did something I had not accounted for. It bled upward. A thread of gold light off the broken tower, rising into a sky that had never once been interesting, and somewhere past that sky, for the first time in 200 years, something enormous rolled over in its sleep and opened an eye. I'd been so proud of cracking the god. I hadn't stopped to ask who the god answered to. The answer came down the mountain in daylight, and the whole city went quiet to watch it walk. Out of the high temple, the one building even the tower bowed to, came a thing wearing a person the way you or I wear a coat. The vessel. That's the closest word for it. A servant of the gods poured into a human shell, sent down to tidy up a mess mortals had made of the machine. It walked through fire and rubble without hurrying, without flinching, without a single thought I could read, because there was no person left inside to have one. I have spent 2 lifetimes reading the tells on every powerful person I've met. I looked at that face and got nothing. Not a locked vault, an empty one. You cannot outread a thing that wants nothing, fears nothing, and was never a person to begin with. For the first time, my whole trick had no handle to grab, and the machine loved it. Every dying ward it passed flared back to life golden strong, like a whip dog rolling over for the one hand it truly answers to. 200 years the tower told everyone the sigils were a gift from the gods. Watching the wards kneel to the vessel, I finally believed the tower had told the truth about exactly one thing. It stopped once, and spoke once, to a magister too frightened to run. I was close enough to hear it. Flat, gentle, final. The anomaly will be corrected, and the record closed. It didn't say my name. It doesn't know names. To a god, I'm not a rebel or a hero or a person. I'm a typo. And it had come down personally to erase me. Now, I've been underestimated my whole life, and I made a very good living off people who think small of me. This was the first time in 2 lifetimes something looked at the whole board, saw exactly what I was worth, and priced me correctly, as a mistake to be quietly deleted. Humbling. Also, motivating. So I did what I always do. I went to read the thing up close, on the theory that it's kept me alive through every fort and tribunal and tower. Nothing with a sigil can see me. I am the blind spot in their whole world. I walked right up on it, quiet as a held breath, completely certain I was invisible. And the vessel turned its head and looked straight at me. Not near me. Not at the noise. At me, the specific shape of the nothing I make in a room. My stomach did the thing it hadn't done since the tower. Because here is the flaw in the best trick I ever had. I am invisible to the machine. The vessel isn't the machine. The vessel belongs to the ones who built it. And an author can always find the hole he left in his own page. It didn't lunge. It didn't shout. It just lifted a hand, patient as a man reaching for an inkwell, and the air went gold. I have never in my life moved so fast to be somewhere a god was not pointing. Where I'd been standing, the pillar simply stopped being. No fire, no thunder, no satisfying crash. Just a clean absence, the stone unwritten out of the world like a line struck from a ledger. That's what correction looks like from the top. It's not violence. It's editing. Ren found me at a dead run, which is how she found out our reliable escape plan. The unseeable had just been repealed by management. We ran. The vessel walked. It never once hurried because why would you chase a typo? You just keep erasing toward it until the page is clean. Backed him to a dead end with a god editing its way toward me, I finally understood the whole shape of the trap in one cold breath. The whole time, I won by being the one thing the machine couldn't see. Fine. But the machine has owners, and you cannot hide a blind spot from the man who drew it. If I want to keep being the thing they can't erase, I don't get to hide from them anymore. I have to go find them. We got out, barely, and only because a god is thorough instead of fast. And once I could breathe, I went back to the one thread I'd been saving. The letter KO left me at the top of the tower. One line, in a 200-year-old hand, naming the person who reached into the coal vault when I was an infant and chose to let me live. I'd expected the name to point at a house, a throne, a face I could go put my hands on. Instead, it pointed at a direction. Every road I could trace ran to the edge of the only map anyone's ever drawn, and then stopped, at a blankness the kingdom has no roads for and no word for except the one everyone's too polite to say. Up. Out. Elsewhere. Sable put his whole network of the officially dead on the name. 2 centuries of erased people, every hidden ledger, every whispered account. Nothing. The name is older than the records that were built to erase names. Which is its own kind of answer. Whoever spared me isn't hidden in the system. They're standing somewhere above it, where the filing doesn't reach. And then it clicked, the way the ugly ones always do. The name in the letter isn't a person in the kingdom. It's one of them, the owners, the ones the vessel answers to, the hands that wrote the machine I cracked. The thing that spared me and the things that want me deleted are the same kind of thing. I don't have one god problem. I have a god problem with a family tree. Seraphine read it over my shoulder and went quiet in the way she does when she's about to tell me something true and unwelcome. If the road goes where you think it goes, she said, then chasing this means leaving everything that's ever helped you win. No court to play. No crowd to turn. No ground to stand on. Just you and them, wherever they are? She's not wrong. She's never wrong. It's her most annoying feature. But here's the math. A thing that wants me erased is coming, and it can see me, and I can't out-hide it or out-fight it down here. The only lade I've got runs off the edge of the world to the one power that ever took my side. So the plan writes itself, same as it always does. When they corner you at the bottom, you stop playing their board and go flip the table they're standing on. Even if the table is in the sky. Before I could go chase gods, I had a smaller and much scarier problem, the people I'd freed. Hundreds of blanks out of the vaults, plus every gnoll who'd been hiding their whole lives, all drifting to the one name they'd heard crack the machine. Sable had them gathered in the deep hall. A whole room of the unfileable, looking at me to be something I've never once been for anyone. A leader with a plan. I gave them the truth, because it's the only currency I've never run out of. I didn't free you to save you, I told them. I freed you because I needed the towers lockpicked and you were the keys. That's not pretty. But it means I never once lied to you, which puts me exactly one rung above every other hand that's ever reached for people like us. The room did not warm to me. Good. Warm rooms make bad decisions. One of them stepped up to say what half the room was thinking, that I'd kicked over the anthill and called the flood a rescue, that free and safe aren't the same word, and that the smart move for a null who survived this long is to disappear again while the gods are busy with me. He wasn't wrong either. I'm collecting people who aren't wrong. It's exhausting. And then Elise, 10 years old, out of the deepest cell in the world, the child they built to be a spare key, walked up beside me and held up her little bare hand to the room. She didn't make a speech. She's 10. She just showed them the same nothing every one of them was born with, the nothing the gods spent 200 years erasing, and let them see a kid who wasn't hiding it anymore. Sometimes the whole argument is just one small hand that refuses to be ashamed. You could watch it move through them, the same cold arithmetic I'd watched turn an army once, the understanding that hiding kept them alive but it never once kept them free, and that the man in front of them was the first one offering the second thing, even though he couldn't promise the first. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to be something the gods would have to account for. So that's what I left behind me when I went to go pick a fight with heaven. Not an army, not a fort, but a room full of people the machine swore didn't exist, agreeing out loud to exist anyway, loudly, where the gods could see. If I was going to make the owners look down at their own page, it seemed only fair to give them something worth reading. The gods, it turns out, do not wait politely for you to finish organizing. The vessel found the deep hall. Of course it did. It doesn't hunt me, it just corrects toward me, patient and golden coming, and now it was coming through a hall full of the exact people I just promised to protect. Nothing sharpens a plan like a deadline made of God. I can't fight a vessel. I can't hide from it. But I'd spend a week living inside the one thing it truly cares about, the broken machine, still bleeding right down here in the roots of the city. And I am, at my core, a man who wins by using the one tool everybody else is too reverent to touch. They worship the machine. I've been elbow deep in it. So I did the blasphemy. I put my bare hand, the one hand the machine can't push against, into its broken artery, and I shoved. Not to fix it. To aim it. 200 years of holy current forced backward through a cracked channel, straight up into the one thing standing in it. The gods built a machine no mortal could touch. They really should have accounted for the mortal it can't touch back. It worked, in the way my plans work, appallingly, and with consequences. The vessel took its master's own power full in the chest and, for 1 second, that perfect empty face cracked, gold spilling out of the seams like something bleeding light. I made a god's errand boy flinch. I'd frame it if the next part hadn't happened, because you don't force that much of a machine backward without paying for it. The blast didn't just crack the vessel. It cracked the air, tore a jagged seam in the world where the current tried to go and couldn't, a wound bleeding dark and cold into the tunnel. I drove off a god and opened a door to somewhere no door should be, in the same breath. My specialty, apparently, winning the fight and losing the map. The vessel pulled back, not beaten. Gods don't get beaten by one rude mortal, just delayed, and left me standing in front of a hole I'd punched in reality, with a haul of freed blanks in my back and the growing certainty that I just RSVP'd to something I could not unattend. When you make the owners look down, they look down. At you. By name. Or by typo. So there it was. Wound in the world. Humming. Open. Leading somewhere the map has no ink for. Everyone sensible kept their distance. I stood a little closer, because I have never once in 3 lifetimes met a door I didn't want to open, and because I had a strong suspicion about where a hole punched straight up through the machine might come out. And then someone stepped out of it. Ancient. Pale. White hair. Worn gray robe. One bare, unmarked hand raised like he'd been expecting the door to open right about now. Kyle. The 200-year-old blank who guarded the tower, who vanished from an empty room and left me a name, not dead, not gone. Ahead of me, the only human being who ever went up the ladder the gods live on and came back down to talk about it. You cracked their machine, Kale said, in the tone of a man who's watched this exact mistake before. Congratulations. Now they'll rebuild it, with you filed inside it this time, in a drawer even I couldn't reach. He didn't say it cruel. He said it like weather. Like a man reading me the same forecast someone should have read him 200 years ago, before it was too late to run. There's exactly one place to stop it, he told me and nodded at the wound I'd torn in the world. Not the tower. The tower's just a franchise. I mean the place the machine is written, where the owners keep the master copy. I mean the place the machine is written, where the owners keep the master copy. And the one door they never thought to guard is the door only our kind can walk. You already opened it. I spent 40 years finding it. You did it in a week, by accident, out of spite. He almost smiled. You'd have been insufferable 200 years ago. You'd have fit right in. My people looked at the hole in the world and did the math nobody wanted to say out loud. Whatever's through there, it isn't a kingdom. There's no court to play, no army to turn, no crowd to work. It's the one place my whole toolbox might mean nothing. Ren checked her knives anyway. Sable spat. Kaine set his jaw. Elise took my hand. That's a crew? You don't explain a seam in reality to a crew like that. You just tell them where the work is. So here's where we are. First they threw me away, and I built a wall out of the trash. Then they sent a god and I cracked it, and learned the god had a boss. Now the bosses have my name, a vessel that can see the one thing nothing could see, and a plan to file me somewhere permanent. And the only man who's ever been where they live is standing at my shoulder, pointing at a hole I punched by accident, telling me the way out isn't up. It's through. Fine. I've never liked management, and I've never once taken the deal. Time to go meet the ones who wrote the rules. Time to go to work. So I stepped through a hole I punched in the world, with a 200-year-old dead man as my tour guide, on the strength of a plan best summarized as, up and to the left of reality. Kale went first, like a man who'd done it before, which he had. I went second, because someone has to, and it's always me. And then there was no floor, and no sky, and no words the kingdom ever gave me for what I was standing in. Imagine a cathedral the size of a country, made of light and iron, every wall a loom, every loom weaving the threads that become the rules the world lives by. The gods don't live in a heaven. They live in a workshop. And I just walked into it through the loading door. Kale pointed, and I followed his finger down one particular thread, a river of gold light pouring out of this place and down, into a small blue-gray world I recognized with a lurch as mine. The Rite I cracked. The god I broke? From up here, it wasn't a god at all. It was one thread on one loom, in a workshop full of them, feeding a machine into a world too small to see the hand on the lever. I have talked my way off a gallows, out of a tribunal, and through a god's own tower. I stood under that machinery and felt, for the first time since I died the first time, genuinely small. Which, credit where due, is exactly the feeling the architecture is designed to give you. Nobody builds a room this big to make you feel like you belong in it. I got this far, Kale said quietly, looking up at the thing that broke him. 200 years ago. I stood right about here, and I thought the same thing you're thinking, that anything this big has to be beaten. It doesn't. It has to be understood. That's the mistake they count on. You come up here to fight a god, and you die a soldier. You come up here to read one, and you might just leave a thief. Music to my ears. I've always been a much better thief than soldier. So I did the thing I do. I stopped looking at the size of it and started looking at the seams of it. Because every machine, no matter how holy, is built by someone, and everything someone builds has a weak weld where they got tired or arrogant or bored. God included. Especially gods. Nobody gets lazier than a craftsman who's certain no one will ever check his work. Kale walked me deeper, and the scale kept getting worse in a specific way that rearranges what you thought your whole fight was about. Loom after loom after loom, each one pouring its river of gold down into its own small world. Rank upon rank of them, past counting, past horizon. And it landed on me all at once, the size of the lie. My whole life, the Rite, the Sigils, the culling, the hand, the tower, the gods. That was one loom. One world's worth of a trick these things run everywhere, on everyone, forever. Every kingdom under every sky, kneeling to its own, gift from the gods, never once told the gift is rented and the god is a tenant farmer working the machine. I didn't crack a world's chains. I found a splinter of a chain around every world there is. Here's the thing about showing a man the true size of the injustice he's fighting. You think it'll break him? Sometimes it just changes what he's fighting. I came up here to save my kingdom from its gods. Somewhere on that bridge of light, quietly, the job got bigger. If the trick runs on every loom, then cracking one was never going to be enough. You don't fix a leak by bailing one bucket. You go find the tap. And the machines weren't unattended. Far off, tending the looms, moved servants, like the vessel, but many, gold and gray, patient, endless, keeping the threads true. A whole civil service of the divine, filing paperwork on the fate of worlds. I've been picturing gods as thunder and wrath. Turns out the apparatus that's been erasing men like me for 2,000 years is mostly middle management. Somehow that's worse. And one of them, far off, small with distance, stopped its work and turned its head and looked the long way across the machine straight at me. Same trick the vessel pulled. Up here, in the place they made, I'm not invisible anymore. I'm the one thing on the whole factory floor that isn't supposed to be there. A splinter walking around inside the hand. He came to meet us before the servants could swarm. A man, an actual human man, in the God's own gray and gold livery, moving through the machinery like he owned a desk in it. Lean, hard, gray at the temples, a soldier's scars under a clerk's calm. And when he raised his hand to stop me, it was bare. Unmarked. Blank. Same as mine. Same as Kale's. Another one, he said, looking at me like a tax he'd hoped was already paid. Kestrel. A blank, a spared blank, like me, pulled off the cull shelf as an infant and grown up. Except Kestrel got all the way up here a generation ago, stood where I'm standing, and when the gods offered him the deal, he took it. Is what I look like if I say yes. Meeting your dark reflection is bad enough. Meeting it in a nicer coat, with better posture, doing the enemy's filing, that's a specific kind of insulting. Let me guess the speech, he said. The machine's a cage. The gods are frauds. You're gonna break it and free everyone. He almost smiled, and it was the worst thing I'd seen up there. I gave that speech. I believed it harder than you do. Then they showed me what's on the other side of the off switch, and I grew up. You want to free the worlds? Fine. Flip the machine off. Watch every wall, every ward, every healer's hands go dark at once, and count the dead. I did the math they'll make you do. I just did it first. And here's where being me finally paid off in the workshop of the gods. I can't read a vessel. There's nobody home. But Kestrel? Kestrel is a person. Scared and proud and lying to himself in a language I speak fluently. Because it's my native tongue. I looked at the man the gods turned, and under the gray and gold and the better posture, I read the one tell that matters. He doesn't serve them because he agrees. He serves them because he's afraid the deal was the only honest thing anyone ever offered him. Noted. He didn't kill me. That told me plenty too. A true believer would have corrected me on the spot. Instead, he turned to walk me deeper in. Someone wants to meet you, he said, like a threat and an apology wearing the same coat. So I followed the god's blank into the heart of the god's machine, on the invitation of a power that already knew my name. Everyone always wants to meet me right before the floor drops out. You'd think I'd learn. Kale watched Kestrel walk ahead and said, very low, the most frightening sentence of the day, I knew him when he still argued. A whole tragedy in 5 words. Kestrel didn't lose to the gods in a fight. He lost the long way, one reasonable compromise at a time, each one sensible, until the sum of the sensible things was a man in their livery telling the next of us to give up. That's the real machine up here. Not the looms, the slow, kind, reasonable talking you into it. And I was walking straight toward the best talker they had. The heart of the machine wasn't a throne room. It was a garden. Threads of gold light growing up out of the iron like vines, budding into new little rules, new worlds, tended and pruned and watered with a patience that made my skin crawl. Because I know what a garden means. A garden means someone is growing something. On purpose. For a harvest. And the gardener stood up to greet me. Not a vessel. Not a servant. One of them, an author, a maker, immense and old past the meaning of the word, robes of woven starlight, a face like a kind grandfather carved from a mountain, warm gold light pouring off it. The others up here felt like architecture. This one felt weather that loved you, which is, obviously, the most dangerous thing I have ever stood in front of. There you are, the gardener said, and this is the part I hate. It said it the way you'd greet a crop that finally came in. Fondly. Proudly. Like it had been waiting a very long time and I was right on schedule. Every other power I faced wanted to be gone. This one looked at me like I was the best thing it had ever grown. And somewhere under the awe, the oldest instinct I've got started screaming, because I finally recognized the feeling in the room. It was ownership. It walked me through its garden and told me its secret, gently, like a gift. The other authors called blanks because a null is the one thing that can switch the machine off, and you don't leave the off switch lying where a slave might find it. But this one, the gardener, thought the culling was a waste. So for 2,000 years, quietly, against its own kind, it has been reaching into the cull vaults of 100 worlds and sparing nulls. Growing them. Aiming them. A slow rebellion planted one saved infant at a time. Kestrel was one. I am, apparently, the prize bloom. I saved you, it said, warm as summer, because you are the key I have been growing for 2,000 years. Help me end the culling. Take the switch. And when it's done, the great hand opened, and the whole garden of worlds leaned toward the offer. The chair is yours. The first mortal offer. You would not break the machine, child. You would inherit it. And I'll be honest with you, for one long, ugly heartbeat, standing in a garden grown to make exactly that offer feel like coming home, I wanted to say yes. But I'd been handed a gift with a hook in it too many times to swallow this one whole. A cure with a leash. A hostage called a duty. A throne called a rescue. Everybody who's ever given me something was really handing me a collar, and the warmer the hand, the tighter the buckle. So instead of saying yes, I asked the one question a con man learns to ask first. Not what are you offering me, but how long have you been offering it? And the gardener, proud of its work, told me the truth. 2,000 years of sparing nulls, and every one of them a gamble that came up short, spared infants who grew into frightened hermits, or into kestrels, or into nothing. Until it decided the flaw wasn't the blank. It was the life inside the blank. A null body is the perfect key, but it needs the right hand to turn it, a mind already forged into a weapon. So the gardener went looking, across worlds, for a soul that was already a blade. And it found one. A killer. A cleaner. A man who ended people with information in a world I used to call home. And when that man died, the way I died, the gardener caught the thread, and carried it, and planted it in the one spared infant it had been saving for exactly this. Me. It's me. My death wasn't an accident, and my second life wasn't luck. The operative I was, the reject I woke up as, the whole impossible pairing of a trained killer's mind and the one body no magic can see, that's not a story. It's an assignment. The gardener didn't spare a baby in hope. It built a weapon and grew it in a jar for 17 years, and every clever thing I have ever been proud of, every con and every escape and every enemy I ever outthought, it was watching, and nodding, and thinking good, the blade takes an edge nicely. You want to know the worst thing a self-made man can hear? That he was made. I looked at my own bare hand, the hand I've built my whole legend on, the one thing in creation that's supposed to be mine, unmarked, unowned, unwritten, and for 1 second I couldn't tell if a single thing I'd ever done was me, or just the tool doing what the gardener grew it to do. That's the real weapon up here. Not the looms. The doubt. And the gardener planted that in me too, patient as ever, and waited for it to bloom. And off to the side, Kestrel watched me get told exactly what he got told, a generation ago, and I understood him completely at last. This is where he broke. Not at the off-switch math. Here. At the moment you learn your rebellion was assigned, your freedom was a crop, and the god who saved you did it because you were useful. Kestrel heard this and decided that if he was going to be a tool either way, he'd at least pick the hand that fed him. I heard it and felt something much older and much colder than doubt start to wake up. Because I've been owned by experts, and I have never once, not one single time, stayed owned. The gardener waited for my answer with the bottomless patience of a thing that has never once been told no by its own crop. It had grown me to say yes. It had built the very doubt that would make yes feel like relief. Every angle of the room, every warm light, every kind word, engineered across 2,000 years to funnel one manufactured weapon into one prepared chair. It was, I have to admit, the finest trap I have ever been inside. And I've made a career of the second finest, so I did the only thing that has ever gotten me out of a perfect trap. I stopped playing the game they built and started playing the one thing they can't script, the player. Here's what you got wrong. I told a god the size of weather. You didn't grow a key. You grew a reader. You spent 2,000 years making the one mind in creation that takes apart everything it's handed to see how it works, and then you handed it yourself. You didn't build a tool, you old fool. You built the one thing that was always, eventually, going to take you apart. Congratulations. Best work you ever did. And the weather that loved me flickered. Just once. The faintest shadow of the one expression a 2,000-year-old gardener never plans for, the suspicion that the crop has been reading the farmer the whole time it was being grown. It's the same tell I pulled off every proud, certain, powerful thing I've ever beaten, from a frontier commander to a king to a god's own tower. They're all sure they're the one holding the knife. None of them ever check whose hand is really on the handle until it's already turning. It recovered, of course. Things that big don't stay rattled. It smiled its warm mountain smile and told me to think on the offer, to see the rest of the work before I decided, and sent me deeper with Kestrel, certain that a full tour of what it had built would bring its prize bloom to heal. Which was its second mistake of the day. Because the surest way to lose me is to give me an unsupervised look at how your machine really runs. I don't tour. I case. So Kestrel walked me down, away from the warm garden, into the part of the workshop the gardener doesn't decorate, the archive under the looms, where the machine keeps its accounts. And I want to tell you I went looking for a weakness to exploit, cold and professional. Most true. But part of me went looking for something simpler and worse. I wanted to know what happens to the gnolls that don't get spared. I wanted to know the price of the 2,000 years of gambling that ended in me. So I went down to read the ledger. I really wish I hadn't. Under the beautiful machine there's a cold room, and the cold room is the true face of the gods. Endless. Silent. Shelf after shelf of dim little threads, each one a life the machine couldn't use and wouldn't waste, because a gnoll is the one thing a loom can't spin back into the world. So, they don't recycle us. They file us. 2,000 years of erased minds, cataloged and shelved and kept, in the dark, under the garden, so the flowers up top can have their nice light. I've stood in a vault of the erased before, under a tower, and thought I'd seen the bottom of it. I hadn't even seen the floor. This is where the bottom is. Every blank of every world a gardener didn't happen to pick, every off-switch the culling faction found first, 2,000 years deep and still being added to while I stood there, a genocide so old and so tidy it doesn't even feel like rage from the inside. It feels like filing. And filing, it turns out, is the thing I have hated longest and best. They should not have shown me the filing. And then, because the gods have a sense of humor and it is cruel, I found my own. A thread on a shelf, dim and small, filed the day I was branded, with a second mark beside it, a correction, in a hand I now knew, reassigned. Spared. Deployed. My whole life, reduced to 3 words in a ledger by the god that loves me. Not erased, no. Requisitioned. The culling faction filed me to die. The gardener pulled me for parts. 2 gods, 1 clerk shelf, and not one entry on it that ever once asked what I wanted. And that's when the other one showed up. Not the gardener's warmth. Its opposite. The first author, the hand that signs the culling, the one that filed me to die before I could walk, the god that actually wants me gone, poured itself into the cold room like a sunrise made of judgment, and every shelf and servant and thread in that infinite archive turned toward me at once. The gardener grew me in secret. It just found out its rival's prize weapon is standing in the accounts room, reading the books. 2 gods, at war over what to do with me, and I'm the only thing in the room small enough to fit through the crack between them. So here's where the work is. 1 god wants to delete me. 1 god wants to deploy me. Both of them are absolutely certain this ends with me being theirs. And I'm standing in the one place in all creation where the whole rotten trick is written down in plain sight, between 2 owners who hate each other more than either of them has bothered to fear me. Everybody up here keeps making the same beautiful mistake. They keep handing the reader the book. They keep handing the thief the room. They keep offering the one unownable thing in creation a chair and calling it a gift. I've been saying no to that offer my whole life, on two worlds, to kings and gods alike. I'm not going to stop now that the offer finally got interesting. Time to go to work. So there I was. One god who filed me to die, one god who grew me to use. Both of them finally in the same room, both of them absolutely certain that when the dust cleared, I'd be theirs. 2,000 years of culling and sparing, of leash and cure, of hostage and throne, all of it funneling down to one blink-handed kid on a bridge of light, being offered, one more time, the same two doors everyone's ever offered me. Kneel, or be corrected. Serve, or be erased. Pick a hand and be a tool. The first author made its case the way judgment does, no words, just the cold certainty of a thing striking a name from a page. To it, I'm the flaw in 2,000 years of clean work, and the kind thing, the tidy thing, is to close the account. It's not cruel. It's worse than cruel. It's reasonable. The worst tyrants always are. And the gardener made its case the way love does when love is really ownership. The warm hand, the open chair, the promise that all I had to do to end the culling was become the thing that runs it. Take the switch. Sit in the seat. Be the first mortal god. It grew me for exactly this moment, and every warm light in that garden was tuned to make yes feel like finally coming home. And for one honest breath, standing between a god that wanted me erased and a god that wanted me kept, I felt the pull of both at once, and understood, cold and clear, that they were the same offer in two different colors. Be theirs? Just pick a shade. And I said no. To both. At the same time. Out loud, in the workshop of creation, to the two most powerful things that have ever wanted me. Because here's the thing, every hand that ever reached for me never once understood. I don't say no to the offer. I say no to being offered. You don't get to hand me a leash and call it a gift, whether the gift is a cure, or a crown, or a chair at the top of the world. There's always a third door. There's always a third door. And I've spent 2 lifetimes learning that the third door is never on the wall they show you. It's the one you cut yourself, while they're busy arguing over which of them owns you. So while 2 gods geared up to fight over the tool stopped listening to either of them, and started reading the room the way it was built to, the way the gardener spent 2,000 years making sure it could. Every loom, every thread, every weld where a certain craftsman got lazy because he was sure no slave would ever climb this high and check his work. They didn't grow a key. They really should have listened when I told them what they grew, and then help arrive from the last place I'd have trusted it, Kestrel. The god's own blank, the man who took the deal a generation ago, stepped up to my shoulder and offered to open the way to the machine's core. You can't reach it alone, he said. I've served this place 30 years. I know the road. Let me help you do the thing I was too afraid to, a broken man offering to finish his own unfinished rebellion through mine. It was the most human thing I'd seen up there, which should have been my warning, because at the core, at the exact moment I put my bare hand on the master weld, Kestrel took me, pinned the one arm that mattered and turned me straight over to the first author, and his cold face finally cracked open on the truth underneath. 30 years I kept my head down, he said, and he was almost weeping, and you walk in and remind me what I gave up, and I cannot watch another one of us die for it. If one of us has to be the god's blank, let it stay me. At least I know how to survive it, the dark mirror completed. He didn't sell me for power. He sold me because hope, up here, is the thing that finally kills you, and he could not bear to hope again. So there's the bottom of the whole story. Betrayed at the top of the world, by my own reflection, handed to the god that wants me deleted, in a place with no court to play and no crowd to turn and no ground to stand on. Outguarded, outnumbered, sold out, and pinned. From the outside, it looked like the end. The god certainly thought so. The gardener looked genuinely grieved. The first author looked satisfied. And I looked, if I'm honest, a little bored. Because I want you to remember something about the last 2 times I ended up exactly here, on my knees, sold out, surrounded, at the center of the enemy's power. The tribunal. The throne. Both times, that wasn't the moment I lost. That was the moment I'd spent the whole story building. You don't walk a reader into the one room where the whole machine is written down and expect him to have come empty-handed. Kestrel didn't betray my plan. Kestrel was a line in it. I just didn't tell him, or you, which line. Here's what a god can't read, because a god was never desperate enough to learn it, what the powerless do when you're not watching. While 2 authors fought over the shape of my future, the wound I tore between the worlds tore wider, and up through it into the workshop of creation came the one thing the gods filed under impossible. The erased. The blank order. Every no the machine swore didn't exist, led by a bald outlaw and a 10-year-old, walking into heaven because heaven forgot to lock the door only our kind can open. At the front of that impossible tide, a small girl and a bald outlaw, leading 100 of the officially dead into the workshop of creation like they were strolling into a market to haggle over turnips. I have never, in 2 lives, been prouder of anything. That was the plan I laid the day I cracked the tower, before I even knew its name. One blank is a splinter. 100 blanks spread across a machine built to be untouchable by exactly one thing that's not a splinter. That's a hand around the machine's throat. Every null the gardener spared and the culling faction filed, every erased life in 2,000 years of shelves. I didn't come up here to beg 2 gods for mine. I came to bring all of them and put a bare unmarked hand on every weld at once. And the gods finally understood, a heartbeat too late, the mistake they'd both been making for 2,000 years. The first author thought the danger was one off switch, so it called us one at a time. The gardener thought the answer was one perfect key, so it grew me alone. Neither of them ever imagined the nulls doing the one thing nulls were never allowed to do, finding each other. You spend 2 millennia making sure the off switches never meet. Then a reject from a frontier fort introduces them. Whoops. Even Kestrel broke, the good way, this time. He'd sold me because he couldn't bear to hope alone. Then he watched 100 of us pour into heaven together, unhidden, unafraid, a thing he'd been told his whole service was impossible, and I watched 30 years of reasonable surrender crack off his face. You didn't come to take the chair, he said. You came to break it so no one ever has to sit in it again. Yeah, Kestrel. Welcome back. Took you long enough. Grab a loom. And me? I did what I came to do. I put my one bare, unowned, unwritten hand on the master weld of creation, the seam where the whole machine is joined, the one the lazy craftsman was sure no slave would ever reach, and I got ready to do to the workshop of the gods what I did to a frontier commander's ledger and a king's tower and a capital's holy machine. Not smash it. Open it. Show everyone the gears. Because I'd listened to Kale, and to Kestrel, and to the cold math they were both so sure would stop me. Flip the switch off and the walls come down, and the worlds get eaten. Fine. So I didn't flip it off. I did something the gods never guarded against, because it never occurred to them a slave would want it. I cracked the machine open, broke the ownership, not the magic. Snapped the lock off the master copy and left the machine running, humming, alive, and unowned. Every thread still feeding every world. Just no hand left that gets to hold them all. The switch was never supposed to be common. The whole 2,000-year crime was one idea that the machine that runs reality belongs to a few makers and everyone else rents. So I made the off switch common. Put the master weld where any bare hand in any world can reach it. Magic doesn't die. It stops being theirs. Overnight, the gods went from owners of creation to the first hands on a machine that now answers to anyone willing to learn it. Demoted. From gods to neighbors. It's the most violent thing I have ever done, and I did it without breaking a single law. All across more worlds than I'll ever count, the light that used to answer to a handful of gods flickered, and reached, and found new hands, a farmer's, a healer's, the child's, 1,000 ordinary people touching the thing that was, an hour before, the private property of heaven. Not free of danger. Just free of owners. The first author, the cold judge, felt 2,000 years of unquestioned authorship come off its account like a struck name, and had no idea what to do, because it had never once been edited. And the gardener, the warm one, the one that loved me, watched its prize bloom refuse the chair and give the whole garden away to everyone at once, and understood finally that it had grown exactly the thing it feared its rival would, not a key that opens the machine for one owner, but the first free hand that opens it for all of them. And then I turned to the god that built me, because that account still needed closing. The gardener looked down at me, smaller now, dimmer, one hand among many, with an expression I'll be chewing on for a while. Not rage. Not even grief. Wonder. The specific wonder of a craftsman who finally sees the thing he made do something he never designed. I made you, it said, quiet as a garden at dusk. Not a boast. A question. 2,000 years of certainty, asking one small mortal to confirm that at least the making was real. And here's the thing, it was. It was true. I am the weapon it grew. The killer's mind, the null's hand, the whole engineered impossible pairing. It made me. I looked at God in its ancient kind face, and I did not give it the mercy of a lie. For a long moment, the God that grew me and the weapon that refused it just looked at each other across the ruin of its perfect plan. 2,000 years of certainty and a 17-year-old reject, and neither of us blinked. I'll be honest, I'm the one who wanted to. You made me. I told it. Fine. You planted the blade. But you spent 2,000 years so sure that a made thing can only ever cut the way its maker aimed it. And every single thing I just did, I did with the edge you ground, pointed at you. That's your answer, old man? Yes, you made me. And the first free choice your perfect weapon ever made was to prove that making a thing is not the same as owning it. You didn't lose because I was too strong. You lost because you never once believed the thing you built could belong to itself. A made man telling his maker no. It's the only reply that was ever going to mean anything. It cost me more than I'll ever say to give it evenly. When the ownership broke, every leash that ran off it went slack across every world at once. Elise, 10 years old, built to be a spare key, filed as a failsafe before she could talk, stood in the light of the machine she'd helped crack and was, for the first time in her small life, no one's insurance. Just a kid. Free. She looked up at me and grinned with a gap where a tooth used to be, and I swear that grin did more damage to the gods than anything my hand did. And Seraphine, who spent her whole life a blade in someone else's fist, whose leash I'd cut once already only to hand her a war, crossed the blazing floor of heaven itself to stand next to the reject. Again, she's made a habit of it now. Free of her house, free of the machine, free of every hand that ever held her, and she spent that freedom walking toward the most dangerous man in creation, on purpose, in front of two gods. I told her once that free isn't the same as safe. She told me, this time, that she'd never asked to be safe. She'd asked to be hers. And now she was. And Cell, 200 years of broken warden, made to guard the very lock I just snapped, stood in the light of a free machine and let something go that he'd carried since before my grandfather was born. The gods took his rebellion and turned him into its jailer. He spent 2 centuries as the proof that our kind can't win. He got to spend his last day up here as the proof that we can. I didn't fix what they did to him. Nobody can. But he got to see it undone. That's not nothing. From where he was standing, it was everything. Down below, across more worlds than I'll ever walk, the machine kept running, but the hands changed. Words holding back the dark, tended now by anyone who'd learn instead of the few who owned. Magic unrented. God demoted to the first among many. It's glorious and it's dangerous and it's an absolute mess, which is exactly what freedom looks like from the inside, and exactly what tyrants call the end of the world. Good. Let them. I came up here a frontier reject, chasing a name and a letter. I'm leaving as the thing every god in creation now knows the shape of, the one bare hand that reached the top of the machine and gave it away instead of taking it. The first author withdrew to lick 2,000 years of wounds. The gardener went back to its garden, quieter, to think about the crop that read the farmer. And the war between them over what to do with me just became a much bigger, much older problem for a much later day. Because here's the thing about cracking a machine open so everyone can see the gears. Everyone includes whoever the gods themselves were working for. 2,000 years, I thought I was fighting gods. Standing in the wreck of their workshop, watching the freed light pour out into the dark, I felt something else out there notice, something the authors were only ever the middlemen for, older than turning one enormous eye toward the small bare hand that just gave its product away for free. Turns out even gods have management. And I have never, not once in any life, liked management. And me? I finally know who spared the infant, and why. And it was a god that loved me like a crop, and grew me like a weapon, and I said no to it anyway. But there's one line in that old letter I still haven't run down. The man I was, in the light before all this, the killer whose thread a god reached across worlds to plant. The gardener caught that thread. But somebody had to cut it first. Somebody arranged the death of a cleaner in a world I used to call home, so a god could carry his soul up a ladder. I know who deployed me. I still don't know who killed me. The only unread man in creation, and there's still one page even I haven't turned. So, they threw me away, and I built a wall out of the trash. They sent a god, and I cracked it. They grew me for a chair, and I gave the chair away. They think this is the end of the story, the reject who beat heaven. They have no idea. Somewhere out past the gods there's a bigger hand that just noticed me, and somewhere out past the gods there's a bigger hand that just noticed me, and somewhere back before all of it there's a death with my name on it that somebody arranged. 2 threads left to pull. Well, I've never once left a book unfinished, and I have never in any life stopped at the last locked door. Time to go meet the ones the gods answer to. Time to find out who really killed me. Time to go to work.